Some scandals are whispered in back rooms. Others explode under the glare of 1,000 flashbulbs. For Cole Harrington, a man who built an empire on predicting market trends, the one trend he never saw coming was his own spectacular downfall. On a night draped in diamonds and champagne at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala, he committed an act so publicly vile, so callously cruel, that it would sever his life in two. He shoved his pregnant wife, Lauren, to appease his mistress. But the real story isn't the shove that the whole world saw. It's what happened hours later in the dead of night, when the gates of his own magnificent estate swung shut, and the man who thought he owned the world was escorted off his property like a common trespasser. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of consequence, of a secret power held by the woman he tried to break. And the night a titan of industry learned what it truly meant to be left with nothing. The air in the grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum was thick with the scent of money, a heady perfume of expensive florals, vintage champagne, and the collective ambition of New York City's elite. It was the annual charity gala, the undisputed pinnacle of the social calendar, where fortunes were pledged on silent auction cards, and reputations were made or shattered between the appetizer and the main course. From the outside, Cole and Lauren Harrington were the evening's crowning jewels. He was Cole Harrington, the CEO of Harrington Capital, a real estate and tech conglomerate that had reshaped the city's skyline. He was tall, with dark hair just starting to silver at the temples, a feature the society pages called distinguished. His smile, a practiced lethal weapon, could close $1 billion deal or charm the most cynical journalist. Tonight he wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, the fabric so fine it seemed to drink the light. She was Lauren Harrington, née Bennett. Where Cole was all sharp angles and predatory grace, Lauren was soft-spoken elegance and quiet intelligence. An architectural historian by training, she had a discerning eye that could see the soul of a building, a skill she now applied to navigating the fragile structures of high society. Tonight she was breathtaking in a deep sapphire gown by Oscar de la Renta that flowed over her body, artfully draping over the gentle swell of her 5-month pregnancy. A cascade of diamonds, the Harrington stars, glittered at her throat, a previous anniversary gift that now felt less like a token of love and more like a beautiful, diamond-studded collar. To the casual observer, they were a portrait of success. But up close, the canvas was cracked. For the past hour, Cole had been holding court, his hand never straying far from the small of Lauren's back, in a proprietary gesture purely for the cameras. But his eyes, those sharp, calculating grey eyes, were constantly scanning the room. Lauren knew who he was looking for. She had known for 6 agonizing months. Her name was Scarlett Monroe. Scarlett was everything Lauren wasn't. She was 26, a piranha in the guise of a social media influencer with a manufactured pout and a body sculpted by discipline and a surgeon's knife. She'd started as a junior marketing associate at Harrington Capital, and within a year she was on Cole's arm at private corporate events, and soon after, in his bed. Tonight she was a vision in blood-red silk, a stark, deliberate contrast to Lauren's serene blue. She wasn't at their table, of course, that would be too brazen even for Cole, but she was strategically placed at a nearby one, surrounded by a coterie of sycophants. Her laughter was just a little too loud, her gaze a little too possessive whenever it landed on their table. "Darling," Cole murmured, his voice a low thrum against her ear, his breath smelling of whiskey. "You haven't said a word for 10 minutes. People will think you're bored." It wasn't a question of concern, it was a command. "Perform." Lauren forced a smile, the muscles in her face feeling stiff. "I'm just taking it all in, Cole. It's quite the spectacle." She took a delicate sip of sparkling water. The baby gave a gentle flutter inside her, a small, secret comfort. "Nate Whitaker is staring," Cole noted, his jaw tightening slightly as he glanced across the room. Nate was his chief rival, a bulldog of a man who ran a competing firm. "He looks like he's waiting for one of us to trip. Don't give him the satisfaction." Lauren's smile became a little more genuine, tinged with irony. "I have no intention of tripping." The evening wore on, a torturous parade of fake smiles and stilted conversations. Lauren felt like a ghost haunting her own life. She watched Cole glad hand a senator, his laughter booming, while she discussed 18th century Parisian architecture with a woman whose face was pulled so tight she seemed perpetually surprised. All the while, the invisible string between Cole and Scarlett seemed to pull tighter, a tangible force in the glittering room. Lauren could see the smirks they exchanged over the tops of champagne flutes, the way his eyes would follow Scarlett as she moved through the crowd. The trouble began during the live auction. A lavish 7-day yacht trip through the Greek Isles was on the block. The bidding was fierce, quickly climbing into the 6 figures. "Let's get it," Cole said suddenly, grabbing his bidding paddle. "A baby moon. It'll be perfect." Lauren looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time all night. The suggestion was so audacious, so utterly detached from the cold reality of their marriage, that she felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in her throat. A baby moon, as if they were a normal, happy couple, anticipating the arrival of their child, and not a man, his wife, and the spectre of his mistress, all breathing the same recycled air. Before she could form a reply, Scarlett made her move. She glided over to their table, a vision in crimson, her smile wide and predatory. "Cole, darling," she purred, completely ignoring Lauren. "My table is simply dying to know if the rumors are true. Are you really planning to break ground on the new Celestial Tower before Christmas?" Her hand rested familiarly on his shoulder, her long red nails a stark contrast against the black of his tuxedo. It was a power play executed in front of God and everyone. She was marking her territory. The nearby tables fell into a hushed silence, all eyes on the tableau. This was the drama they had paid thousands of dollars to see. Cole, caught between his public image and his private indiscretions, stiffened. He was a man who hated being cornered. "Scarlett," he said, his voice a low warning. "We're in the middle of the auction." "Oh, don't be such a bore." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on Lauren's nerves. She leaned in closer, her lips almost touching his ear, whispering something that made a slow, dark smile spread across Cole's face. Lauren felt a cold dread wash over her. It was one thing to endure the private humiliation, the knowledge of his betrayal. It was another to have it flaunted so publicly, to be rendered invisible in her own chair while her husband was seduced in plain sight. The baby kicked harder this time, as if sensing its mother's distress. That was it. She couldn't sit there for one more second. Slowly, gracefully, she placed her napkin on the table and rose. "If you'll excuse me," she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the charged air. "I need some air." She didn't look at Cole, but she felt his irritation, a palpable wave of anger. Her leaving was an indictment, a crack in the perfect facade. She turned to walk away, her back straight, her head held high. What happened next seemed to unfold in surreal slow motion. "Lauren, sit down," Cole commanded, his voice a harsh whisper. She ignored him, taking another step. Scarlett, seeing her prize momentarily distracted, chose that moment to up the ante. "Let her go, Cole. She's probably just feeling emotional. You know, the hormones." She let out a small, condescending laugh. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Cole, enraged at being publicly managed by both his wife and his mistress, reacted with the brutish instinct of a cornered animal. He stood up, intending to grab Lauren's arm to physically pull her back into her seat and restore his semblance of control. But he misjudged the distance. He misjudged his own whiskey-fueled frustration. He misjudged the slight shift in Lauren's balance as she turned. His hand didn't grab her arm. It shoved. It was a hard, impatient push to her shoulder. For a woman not carrying the precious weight of a child, it might have resulted in a stumble. For Lauren, 5 months pregnant and caught off guard, it was catastrophic. She cried out, a small gasp of shock and fear, as her heel caught on the leg of a chair. She pinwheeled backward, her arms flailing for something to hold on to. The sapphire gown swirled around her as she fell, a collapsing constellation of blue silk and shattered dignity. She landed hard on her side, the impact jarring through her entire body. The collective gasp of the hundreds of onlookers was like the sound of the tide being sucked out to sea, leaving behind a silent, horrified shore. For a moment, there was no sound but the frantic clicking of cameras as photographers, smelling blood in the water, captured the image that would be on the front page of every tabloid by morning. Cole Harrington, titan of industry, standing over his fallen pregnant wife, while his mistress in red looked on with a flicker of triumph in her eyes. In that frozen moment, as a sharp, terrifying pain shot through her abdomen, Lauren looked up at her husband. She saw no remorse in his eyes, only fury. Fury at her for creating a scene, for embarrassing him. And in his eyes, she saw the end of everything, and the beginning of something else. The silence in the grand hall lasted for what felt like an eternity, a vacuum of shock that sucked all the air from the room. Then chaos erupted. People surged to their feet. A woman screamed. Waitstaff rushed forward, their professionalism warring with their horror. Nate Whitaker, Cole's rival, was one of the first to reach Lauren. He knelt beside her, his usual smug expression replaced by one of genuine concern. "Lauren, are you all right? Don't move. Someone call a doctor." Cole seemed to snap out of his stupor, the gravity of his public act finally piercing his whiskey-fueled rage. The flashbulbs were like relentless, accusatory strobes, searing the moment into history. "Lauren, my God," he blustered, rushing to her side and trying to wave Whitaker away. "Get away from her. It was an accident. She stumbled." But Lauren wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were wide with fear, one hand instinctively clutching her stomach, where the sharp pain was now a dull, terrifying ache. 2 medically trained gala attendees, a surgeon and a nurse, were already there, gently assessing her. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was true. I need to go." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread across her skin. The shove was bad enough. The pity in the eyes of her peers was unbearable. Cole was in full damage control mode, his voice loud and performative. "Of course, darling, let's get you home. Everyone, please give us some space. My wife is pregnant. She just felt faint and I tried to catch her." The lie was so bald, so pathetic, that a low murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Everyone had seen it. The shove, the anger. Scarlett Monroe, realizing she was now at the center of a PR nuclear blast, had already begun to discreetly melt back into the crowd, her face a mask of panicked innocence. A security detail from the museum helped Lauren to her feet. She refused to take Cole's offered hand, instead leaning on the arm of a stoic security guard. "I'll take my own car," she said, her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to Cole's frantic energy. "Don't be ridiculous, Lauren," he hissed, trying to steer her toward the exit. "We'll leave together. We need to present a united front." She stopped and looked at him. The look in her eyes was not one of sadness or betrayal. It was something colder, something harder. It was the look of a decision being made. "No, Cole, we don't." She walked away, a small, regal procession of 2 security guards and the concerned nurse, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of his own making. The flashbulbs followed her out, but then they swung back to him, hungry for the next chapter of the drama. The ride home to their sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a study in transformation. The initial shock and fear for her baby began to recede, replaced by a glacial calm. The pain in her side had subsided to a throbbing reminder of the violation, but a quick, discreet call to her obstetrician from the back of the car reassured her that unless the pain worsened or other symptoms appeared, the baby was likely cushioned and safe. The doctor's calm voice was a balm, allowing Lauren's mind to shift from fear to focus. She didn't cry. The time for tears was long past, wasted over months of lonely nights and suspicious text messages. The public humiliation was not the wound. It was the anesthetic. It had numbed her to any lingering hope, any last shred of affection she might have harbored for the man she had once loved. The shove was not an act of passion. It was an act of convenience. He had pushed her aside, physically and metaphorically, to clear the path to what he truly wanted. And in the silent, leather-clad cocoon of the chauffeured Maybach, Lauren Harrington decided that she was done being pushed. She pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over her contacts before she pressed the first name. The phone rang only once. "Harold," she said, her voice perfectly even. "Lauren," the voice on the other end replied. It was her maternal grandfather, Harold Bennett. He was 86, with a mind as sharp as a diamond cutter. He was old money, the quiet kind, built on patents and shrewd, century-old investments, not the flashy, brittle kind Cole represented. "I saw the alert from the Times. Are you and the little one all right?" He was always direct. "We're all right, Grandpa. A little shaken, but we're fine." "Good," he said, the single word carrying the weight of immense relief. "Then it's time." "It's time," Lauren confirmed, a sliver of steel entering her voice. "The arrangements are in place, as they have been for the last year. Ava is ready. Mr. Calloway is on site. You just need to give the word." "Consider it given," she said. "I'm 10 minutes out." "I'm proud of you, Lauren," he said softly. "Your grandmother would be too. She never did like men who confused bluster with strength." A single hot tear finally escaped Lauren's eye, but she wiped it away fiercely. "Thank you, Grandpa. I'll call you tomorrow." She disconnected and immediately dialed her second number. Ava Sharma speaking. The voice was crisp, efficient, and devoid of fluff. Ava was the head of family law at the most fearsome legal firm in the state. "Ava, it's Lauren Harrington." "Lauren, I've been alerted. Harold called me a few minutes ago. Are you certain?" "He shoved me, Ava. He shoved his pregnant wife in front of 200 people so his mistress wouldn't be inconvenienced." Lauren stated the facts, laid out like cold, hard evidence. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." "Understood," Ava said. "The morality clause of the prenuptial agreement is now active. The paperwork is prepared. Mr. Calloway of Citadel Security has been given his instructions, effective upon your arrival at the property. All assets held within the Bennett Family Trust, including the Greenwich estate and its contents, are now under your sole and exclusive control. His access has been revoked." Lauren closed her eyes, a wave of dizzying finality washing over her. "Thank you, Ava. Just get inside and lock the doors, Lauren. We'll handle the rest." Meanwhile, Cole was in his own car, fuming. Scarlett was beside him, having slithered out a side exit to meet him. "Can you believe the nerve of her?" Scarlett fumed, reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror. "Walking out like that, making you look like a monster. She's so manipulative." Cole wasn't listening. He was on the phone with his head of PR, a man named Greg Porter. "Just kill it!" Cole snarled into the phone. "I don't care what it costs. Call the editors. Call the publishers. Tell them it was a misunderstanding, a dizzy spell. I was helping her." "Cole, it's everywhere," Greg's panicked voice crackled back. "Billionaire shoves pregnant wife. Video is already going viral. It's not good." "Then make it good," he roared, throwing his phone onto the opposite seat in disgust. He rubbed his temples, the whiskey buzz having curdled into a vicious headache. He was furious with Lauren. How dare she embarrass him like this? He'd smooth it over, of course. He always did. He'd buy her a new necklace, a bigger one this time. Maybe a car. She'd cry a little. He'd apologize with half-hearted sincerity. And then life would go on. He was Cole Harrington. Life always went on. On his terms. "Don't worry, baby," Scarlett cooed, sliding her hand onto his thigh. "She'll get over it. Once you're home, you can handle her." "Yeah," Cole muttered, his confidence slowly returning. "Yeah, I'll handle her." 40 minutes later, his Bentley crested the hill leading to his estate. The place was his sanctuary, his monument to himself, a 25,000-square-foot Georgian mansion on 50 acres of pristine Connecticut waterfront. He'd supervised every detail of its renovation after he and Lauren married. It was the ultimate symbol of his power. As they approached the main gates, massive wrought-iron monstrosities, he pressed the remote. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder this time. The gates remained shut. "What the hell?" he muttered. He could see the lights on in the main house, a warm, inviting glow against the night sky. Lauren's Maybach was parked in the circular driveway. He laid on the horn, a long, angry blast. After a moment, a figure emerged from the gatehouse. Not the usual friendly night guard, but a man in a severe black suit. Cole recognized him vaguely. Mr. Calloway, the head of the private security firm Lauren's family used for their various properties. Calloway walked calmly to the driver's side window. Cole powered it down, his face a mask of indignation. "Calloway, what's the problem? Open the damn gate." "Good evening, Mr. Harrington," Calloway said, his voice polite but firm. He held a tablet in his hand, his eyes flat, impassive. "I'm afraid I can't do that." Cole stared at him, dumbfounded. "What do you mean you can't do that? I own this place. You work for me." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Calloway's lips. "That is a common misconception, sir. My firm, Citadel Security, is contracted by the Bennett Family Trust, which is the legal owner of this property. My duty is to the trust and its designated beneficiary." Scarlett, in the passenger seat, looked confused. "The what?" Cole felt a cold knot of dread begin to form in his stomach. "What the hell are you talking about? This is my house." According to the legal directives I received at 9:47 p.m. this evening from Ms. Ava Sharma on behalf of the beneficiary, Mrs. Lauren Harrington, Calloway continued, his tone as unforgiving as a legal document, "your access privileges to this property have been permanently revoked." He turned his head slightly, gesturing back toward the mansion that glowed under the moonlight, a fortress Cole himself had perfected. "Mr. Harrington," Calloway said, his voice dropping to a quiet, final tone, "you are no longer welcome on this property. I must ask you to leave immediately. Cole stared at him, the polite, firm words failing to penetrate the thick wall of his indignation. The world, as Cole Harrington knew it, didn't operate this way. Gates opened for him. Doors unlocked. People yielded. The suggestion that he, in his own driveway, at the foot of his own palatial home, could be denied entry was so fundamentally absurd it bordered on the comical. "Are you insane?" Cole's voice was dangerously low, a coiled serpent of fury. "This is a joke. A stupid, vindictive little game Lauren is playing because she's hormonal and embarrassed. I demand you put her on the intercom now." Mr. Calloway, a man whose placid expression suggested he had faced down far worse than an irate billionaire, did not move a muscle. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a monolith in a perfectly tailored suit. "Mrs. Harrington has left explicit instructions not to be disturbed, sir. She is resting." "Resting?" Cole let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "She's not resting. She's plotting. This is pathetic, even for her." He leaned out the window, his face contorted with scorn. "Calloway, let's be clear. My name is on the checks that pay your salary. My company's security contracts are worth millions. You work for me. Now, for the last time, open this damn gate before I make one phone call and ensure you're directing traffic in a mall parking lot in Ohio by tomorrow morning." The threat, one that had humbled senators and terrified rivals, simply dissipated in the cool night air. Calloway's expression remained unchanged, but there was a subtle shift in his eyes, a glint of something that looked almost like pity. "That is a common misconception, sir," Calloway said, his tone as even as a frozen lake. "My firm, Citadel Security, is not contracted by you, nor by Harrington Capital. Our client is, and has always been, the Bennett Family Trust." The words hung in the space between them. From the passenger seat, Scarlett, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of amusement and impatience, finally spoke up. "The what? What is he talking about, Cole?" "A trust," he muttered. A cold, slithering dread was beginning to snake its way up his spine, far more chilling than the night air. The Bennett Family Trust. He remembered the name from the mountain of paperwork he'd blindly signed before the wedding. He had assumed it was some dusty old entity managing Lauren's inheritance. A few stocks, maybe a summer cottage in Maine. Nothing of consequence. "The trust owns this property, Mr. Harrington," Calloway continued, as if sensing the gears of confusion and horror grinding in Cole's mind. "It has been the legal owner for over 60 years. Your wife, Lauren, as the primary beneficiary, holds sole authority over residential access. As of approximately 1 hour ago, she invoked her rights under that authority." He lifted the tablet, the screen glowing with what looked like a legal document. "According to the directive I received at 9:47 p.m. this evening from Miss Ava Sharma, on behalf of Mrs. Harrington, your access privileges to the property at 1100 Cove Road and all associated structures have been permanently and irrevocably revoked." Revoked. The word was a hammer blow. It was the word used for credit cards, for driver's licenses, for disgraced memberships. It was not a word that applied to him. This is theft," Cole sputtered, his voice cracking. "I renovated this house. I poured a fortune into it. The marble in that foyer is from Carrara. I selected it myself. That's my home." "With all due respect, sir," Calloway said, retaining his maddening calm, "you have been residing here as a guest of Mrs. Harrington. A long-term guest, certainly, but a guest nonetheless. A guest." The word struck him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. For 5 years he had strode through those halls, hosted global figures, and ruled his domain with the absolute certainty of an emperor. And all along, in the cold, hard letter of the law, he had been nothing more than a visitor. A guest who had just committed the ultimate faux pas at the dinner party. His phone buzzed violently in the center console, a frantic, angry vibration. He snatched it up, desperate for a lifeline, a connection to the world where he was still in charge. The caller ID was a name he knew, but had never spoken to. Ava Sharma, Lauren's lawyer. He jabbed the screen to answer, his voice a venomous hiss. "You've got a lot of damn nerve. Mr. Harrington." Ava's voice was as cool, sharp, and sterile as a surgeon's scalpel. "I trust Mr. Calloway has explained the immediate situation. I am simply calling to formalize it, so there are no lingering misunderstandings that might lead to any unpleasantness with law enforcement." "Unpleasantness?" Cole's voice rose to a near shriek. "You've locked me out of my house." "Correction," Ava said, clinical. "We have secured Mrs. Harrington's house, as per the prenuptial agreement you signed on May 12th, 2020. I'd refer you to Section 4, subsection B, regarding acts of public humiliation or physical endangerment directed at either party. A breach of this clause, as has been witnessed by several hundred individuals and countless recording devices this evening, triggers several non-negotiable consequences, the first of which is Mrs. Harrington's right to exclusive and immediate possession of her primary residence." "I'll fight this," Cole seethed, the words feeling hollow even as he said them. "I'll drag this through every court in the country. I'll bleed you dry." A faint, dry sound came through the phone, something that might have been a humorous chuckle. "I wouldn't advise that. Discovery would be extensive, but since you brought up finances, let's talk about your renovations. We have meticulous records of your expenditures. The prenuptial agreement is quite clear. Any financial contributions to pre-existing non-marital assets are to be legally defined as gifts to the trust. It was very generous of you, Mr. Harrington. You've significantly increased the value of your wife's property." The sheer, calculated brilliance of it was suffocating. He had been outmaneuvered from the very beginning, checkmated by a quiet old man, and a legal document he had dismissed as a trifle. "Mr. Calloway, as an agent of the trust, has the authority to have you cited for trespassing," Ava continued. "Given the events of tonight, I imagine your board of directors would prefer you not add a mugshot to your burgeoning public relations crisis. I strongly advise you to leave quietly. A courier will deliver the full legal notice to your office in the morning. Good night, Mr. Harrington." The line went dead, leaving a silence in the car that was louder than any shouting. Cole sat clutching his phone, his knuckles white. He was breathing heavily, his mind a maelstrom of rage, humiliation, and burgeoning panic. He stared past Calloway's impassive form at the mansion on the hill. His kingdom. The warm lights in the windows, which had seemed so inviting moments before, now felt like triumphant eyes mocking him. He could picture Lauren inside, perhaps standing by the grand bay window in the living room, watching this entire pathetic drama unfold. The image was so emasculating, it made him physically ill. "Cole?" Scarlett's voice was small, tentative, laced with a fear that was rapidly replacing her earlier excitement. The fantasy of the all-powerful billionaire was crumbling before her very eyes. The man beside her wasn't a titan. He was a man arguing with a security guard, a man being lectured by a lawyer over the phone. The allure of his power was predicated on it being absolute. This was pathetic. "So what do we do? Where do we go?" He turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time since they'd left the gala. Her face, framed by the garish red of her dress, was a mask of naked, opportunistic concern. She wasn't worried about him. She was worried about her situation. about what this collapse meant for her. She was the catalyst, the cheap thrill for which he had just incinerated his entire life. A wave of revulsion, directed as much at himself as at her, washed over him. "We," he spat, the word dripping with venom. "There is no we. There was never a we. You were a diversion, an accessory, and now you're an accomplice to a disaster." Scarlett recoiled, her carefully constructed pout twisting into a snarl of indignation. "How is this my fault? You were the one who pushed your pregnant wife in front of the entire world. Dow, because of you!" he roared, finally unleashing the full force of his frustration on the only available target. "Because you couldn't stay at your table. You had to come over. You had to perform. To stake your claim on something that was never yours. You're nothing but a cheap, ambitious parasite." "And you're a fool," she shot back, her voice rising. "A weak fool who just got outplayed by the little wife you thought you could walk all over. You're not powerful, Cole. You're just a bully who lost control." Her words hit him harder than any of Ava Sharma's legal jargon. He stared at her, his chest heaving. "Get out." "What?" she whispered, her bravado vanishing. "Get out of my car." He enunciated each word with cold, deliberate fury. Her face crumpled. "You can't be serious. You're just going to leave me here on the side of the road in the middle of the night? I don't have a home to take you to, do I?" He sneered, the cruelty a balm on his wounded pride. "You wanted the thrill of sleeping with a king. Well, the king has just been dethroned at his own gate. The thrill is gone. Call an Uber. I'm sure your followers would love the story." With a sound that was half a sob and half a gasp of outrage, Scarlett scrambled out of the Bentley. She stood on the perfectly manicured grass verge, her crimson dress a slash of color against the darkness, shivering as the reality of her situation set in. Cole didn't give her a second glance. He wrenched the steering wheel, the Bentley executing a savage three-point turn, its expensive tires squealing a protest on the pristine asphalt. He sped away into the darkness, leaving Scarlett, Mr. Calloway, and his entire life behind him. As he drove, his phone began to light up with a relentless barrage of calls. The chairman of his board, his CFO, his frantic head of PR. He ignored them all. He was a ship taking on water, and the rats were calling to ask why the deck was wet. Inside the mansion, the heavy front door clicked shut, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoing in the cavernous marble foyer. Lauren stood there for a long moment in the silence, her back pressed against the cool wood. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. It was done. She walked slowly through the ground floor, her hand trailing along the wall. This was the space Cole had remade in his own image, all gleaming surfaces, sharp angles, and cold, imposing art. He had stripped away the warmth her grandmother had cultivated, calling it cluttered and dated. He had called it an upgrade. Now Lauren saw it for what it was, a hollow monument to a hollow man. From the bay window in the living room, shrouded in darkness, she could see the distant red tail lights of the Bentley as it sped away down the long, winding drive. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound, aching sadness for the man she had once loved, and an immense, bone-deep relief that the ordeal was finally over. She placed a hand on her belly, where her child rested safe and unaware. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered into the quiet of the house. "And we're going to be okay." She was no longer a guest. She was the protector of this house, this legacy, and the future growing inside her. She had finally come home. The first light of dawn was a dirty grey, filtering through the blackout curtains of the hotel suite. Cole Harrington woke with a jolt, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a disorienting moment, he didn't know where he was. The air was stale, smelling of old room service and expensive whiskey. This wasn't his bedroom with its vaulted ceiling and panoramic views of the Long Island Sound. This was a sterile, anonymous cage. Then the events of the previous night crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. The glittering gala, the condescending laugh from Scarlett, the look of shock on Lauren's face, the sickening thud of her fall, and the final ignominious standoff at the gates of his own home. He stumbled out of bed, his custom tuxedo a wrinkled, pathetic shell of its former glory. He flicked on the giant television, hoping for a distraction, but found only an echo chamber of his own ruin. Every major news network was leading with his story. There it was on a massive high-definition screen, the video, a high-angle shot from a guest's phone, grainy but undeniable. The shove. It was brutal, unequivocal. There was no room for interpretation, no way to spin it as an accident. A panel of talking heads dissected his character like vultures. A shocking display of arrogance and cruelty, one commentator said. This goes beyond a marital dispute. It speaks to a fundamental flaw in judgment, another added. The ticker at the bottom of the screen told the rest of the story. Harrington Capital, HCAP, plummets in pre-market trading amid CEO scandal. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. They were crucifying him. He, Cole Harrington, who had bent this city to his will, was being reduced to a 2-minute segment on morning television. He snatched his phone, his thumb flying to Lauren's contact. He needed to fix this, to command her to release a joint statement, to make this go away. The call went straight to a voicemail he didn't recognize. "You have reached the voicemail of Lauren Bennett," her voice said, calm and impossibly professional. "Please leave a message." Bennett. She had dropped his name. The finality of it was like a door slamming shut in a long, dark hallway. He called again and again. Each time the same cool, detached voice met him, a stranger who had once shared his bed. His next call was to his lawyer, Martin Keene, a legal brawler known for his scorched earth tactics. "Martin," Cole barked, pacing the plush carpet, "I want you to destroy her. File everything. Contest the prenup. I don't care what it costs. I want the house. I want my life back." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Cole, I got the courier delivery from Ava Sharma an hour ago. I'm looking at the agreement now. You need to listen to me very carefully." Martin's voice, usually full of bluster, was sober. "This document, it's a fortress. It was drafted by Harold Bennett's personal firm. These guys don't draft contracts. They build legal cathedrals. The Greenwich estate was never a marital asset. It was deeded to a multi-generational irrevocable trust for Lauren's benefit before you were even in the picture. Your name isn't on a single page." "I put $30 million into that house," Cole roared, the injustice of it burning in his throat. "I know. And the prenup you signed has a clause. I'm reading it right now, that any financial or material contributions to non-marital assets are to be considered irrevocable gifts with no expectation of reimbursement." Martin's voice was grim. "You paid for your own cage, Cole, generously." Cole sank onto the edge of the unmade bed, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold dread. "Fine. She can have the house, a pile of bricks. What about my company? My actual assets?" "That," Martin said, his voice dropping lower, "is where the real demolition begins. You remember the morality clause? The one your previous counsel flagged and you called quaint?" Cole remembered. He had laughed, picturing some dusty Victorian standard of behavior. "Well," Martin continued, "it's not quaint. It's a nuclear weapon. For a publicly witnessed breach, and believe me, A video on every news channel counts as witnessed. The wronged party is entitled to a punitive settlement. It awards Lauren 50% of all assets accumulated during the marriage. He paused, letting the weight of the next words land. And her counsel, the formidable Ms. Sharma, is defining assets as the total appreciation in the market value of your Harrington Capital stock from the date of your wedding until yesterday. The air left Cole's lungs. The company's valuation had grown by nearly $4 billion in the 5 years he'd been married. 50% of that. The number was astronomical, unthinkable. It was a mortal wound to his fortune. She wouldn't. She can't, he stammered. She doesn't know the first thing about finance. She doesn't have to, Martin countered tiredly. She has Harold Bennett, and he, my friend, knows everything. While Cole was absorbing the scale of his financial ruin, Lauren was sitting in the sun-drenched morning room of the Greenwich estate. The house was quiet, the frantic energy of the previous night having given way to a profound calm. A cup of herbal tea steamed on the table beside her. Her hand rested on her belly, a protective, constant gesture. She wasn't celebrating. There was no triumphant joy, only the solemn weight of a necessary amputation. Her grandfather, Harold, sat across from her, his aged hands wrapped around his own cup. He had arrived at dawn. Ava has made the preliminary call to the board's chairman, he said, his voice gentle. They're in a state of panic. The stock is in free fall. They need a solution, and they need one now. Lauren looked out the window at the gardens she had so carefully helped design, the gardens Cole had always referred to as his. I don't want the company, Grandpa. I never did. I don't want his name. I don't want his world. I just want him gone. I want to build a safe, quiet life for this baby. I know, Lauren, Harold said, his eyes full of deep, fierce pride. And that is precisely what we will secure for you. This isn't about revenge. It is about consequences. It's about ensuring the wolf you've ejected from the house can't circle back and tear it down. Ava Sharma joined them via a secure video call. Her face was all business. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. They've suspended Cole, but they're adrift. They fear a hostile takeover from your end. Then we must reassure them, Lauren said, her voice finding a new strength. Present the terms, Ava. His complete and permanent removal. In exchange, I will place my shares, my leverage, into a blind trust. Its only directive will be to ensure the company's stability. I'm not a corporate raider. I'm a mother protecting her future. It was a masterful strategy. She wasn't seizing power. She was restoring order. She was cauterizing the wound that Cole had inflicted, saving the livelihoods of thousands of employees and the investments of shareholders. She was doing what a real CEO should. The news of his termination came via a cold, 2-sentence email the following afternoon. He was no longer CEO, president, or chairman of Harrington Capital. A buyout of his remaining shares was being processed. He was out, cast out from the empire he had built with his own 2 hands. The subsequent weeks were a descent into a grey, featureless hell. His life, once a whirlwind of high-stakes meetings and glamorous events, shrank to the 4 walls of the hotel suite. The calls from his board stopped, replaced by calls from Scarlett's lawyer, negotiating the price of her silence. He wired the money without a second thought, a pathetic severance package for a relationship that had cost him everything. Scarlett Monroe vanished from the face of the earth, her social media wiped clean, a ghost in a blood-red dress. He read that Nate Whitaker had successfully poached 2 of his top project managers. The wolves were circling the wounded beast. He hit his absolute nadir one rainy Tuesday, nearly a month after the gala. The hotel room was a mess, the air thick with the smell of despair. Unshaven, drinking a glass of whiskey that might as well have been water, he aimlessly scrolled through a financial news site. And then he saw it. It wasn't a paparazzi shot, but a photo from a local Greenwich publication. The headline read, "Lauren Bennett pledges support for new prenatal care wing at Greenwich Hospital." In the photo, Lauren stood at a podium. Her pregnancy was obvious now, a beautiful, central part of her. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, and her face, free of the heavy makeup she'd worn for society events, was serene. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her expression was one of profound peace and purpose. She looked strong, healthy, and completely, unshakably whole. He stared at the image, the whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. The last vestiges of his anger, his denial, his self-pity didn't just crumble, they evaporated. In their place was a hollow, echoing clarity that was more painful than any rage. He saw the woman in the photo and remembered the girl he'd first met at an architectural fundraiser. Brilliant, passionate, with a laugh that could light up a room. He had been drawn to that light, but over the years he had done everything in his power to dim it, to make it fit into the small, ornamental box he required for a wife. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her quiet nature for passivity, her grace for submission. He had been given a masterpiece, and he had treated it like a cheap print, ready to be discarded for a newer, flashier model. The mansion, the company, the status. He saw now that they were all props on a stage. The real treasure had been Lauren herself, and the new life she was carrying, and he had shoved it all aside. He finally understood. That night, when the gates had refused to open and Mr. Calloway had turned him away, it wasn't just about a legal document. It was a metaphor for his entire life. He had never truly been the master of the castle. He was just a guest in Lauren's house, a guest in a life of quiet dignity he had never earned, and a guest in the presence of a strength he was too arrogant to recognize. Security hadn't just escorted him out of a mansion. They had escorted him out of a life he had never truly deserved, and could now never get back. And so Cole Harrington's gilded world came crashing down, not with a prolonged war, but with the quiet, decisive click of a gate he could no longer open. His story is a stark, brutal reminder that true power isn't about the name on a skyscraper or the balance in a bank account. It's about the foundations we build our lives upon. Cole built his on arrogance and betrayal, while Lauren, in her quiet way, stood upon a foundation of legacy, intelligence, and a prenuptial agreement he was too proud to read. He thought he was the king, but he was merely a guest in the Queen's castle, and when the time came, she simply and irrevocably changed the locks. What do you think? Was Lauren's move a brilliant act of self-preservation or cold-blooded revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of downfall and hidden strength, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who loves a good drama. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories, where consequences always eventually come knocking. Thank you for listening. The wine, a 1982 Petrus that cost more than her car, shimmered like liquid rubies in the crystal glass. It was on its way to the lips of Sterling Rhodes, a man whose net worth could alter the economies of small nations. From across the opulent dining room of New York's L'Étoile Filante, a young waitress watched her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the faint, oily sheen on the surface of the wine, smelled the ghost of bitter almonds she was trained to recognize. It wasn't just a vintage. It was a death sentence. Time slowed, and her voice, a desperate, raw thing, tore through the restaurant's hushed reverence. The air in L'Étoile Filante was thick with the scent of money and ambition. It clung to the velvet banquettes, mingled with the aroma of white truffle and seared scallops, and settled on the shoulders of the city's titans like a fine, invisible dust. Tonight, the restaurant's gravitational center was Table 7, a secluded alcove with a panoramic view of Central Park's glittering darkness. And at the head of that table sat Sterling Rhodes. At 68, Sterling was less a man and more a monument. His face was a road map of ruthless negotiations and boardroom coups. His silver hair was combed back with the precision of a military formation, and his eyes, the pale, cold blue of a winter sky, missed nothing. He wore a custom Brioni suit that probably cost more than the combined annual salaries of the entire waitstaff. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe Grand Complications didn't just tell time. It declared his mastery over it. To his right sat his wife, Catherine. Decades of being Mrs. Rhodes had sculpted her into a masterpiece of restrained elegance. She was porcelain perfect, draped in Chanel, and adorned with a diamond necklace that glittered with cold fire. But if you looked closely past the practiced smile and the serene posture, you could see the fine hairline cracks of a woman living in a beautiful, suffocating cage. Her laughter never quite reached her eyes, and her hands, when she thought no one was watching, twisted a silk napkin into a tormented knot. Opposite her was their only son, Leo. At 32, Leo was a pale imitation of his father's fire. He had the Rhodes chin, but not the conviction behind it. He wore his ambition like an ill-fitting suit, obvious, expensive, and deeply uncomfortable. He was the perpetual heir apparent, forever languishing in the colossal shadow of the man who signed his checks and second-guessed his every decision. The tension between father and son was a palpable thing, a low hum of resentment beneath the polite clinking of Christofle silverware. Serving them tonight was Isabella Rossi. To the Rhodes family, Isabella was invisible, a functional part of the scenery, like the floral arrangements or the sommelier. She moved with quiet efficiency, her face a mask of professional neutrality. But behind that mask, her mind was a whirlwind. Isabella was not just a waitress. She was the ghost of a life Sterling Rhodes had destroyed. Her father, Marco Rossi, had been a brilliant software engineer, the founder of a small but innovative data analytics firm called Logos. 10 years ago, Rhodes's monolith corporation Nexus Dynamics had initiated a hostile takeover. Marco had fought pouring every penny his family had into the legal battle. Nexus Dynamics, with its army of lawyers and infinite resources, bled him dry. They didn't just acquire his company. They eviscerated it, absorbing his patents for a pittance and casting him aside. 6 months later, broken and bankrupt, Marco Rossi died of a massive heart attack. He was 49. Isabella, then just a teenager, had been left with nothing but a mountain of debt and a burning, all-consuming hatred for Sterling Rhodes. She'd worked her way through college, taking jobs like this one, all while nursing a secret obsession. She studied Rhodes, his business, his family, his habits. When she'd learned he was a regular at L'Étoile Filante, she'd spent 6 months working her way up from butter just for the chance to be in the same room, to breathe the same air as the man who had casually annihilated her world. She didn't have a plan. Revenge felt like a distant, impossible fantasy. She just wanted to watch him, to understand the monster up close. The 1982 Petros Mr. Rhodes, the sommelier, a man named Jean-Pierre, announced with theatrical reverence. He presented the bottle as if it were a holy relic. Sterling gave a curt, dismissive nod, his attention fixed on Leo. "The board is not exploring options, Leo." Sterling said, his voice a low growl that cut through the restaurant's ambience. "The board is doing what I tell them to do. Your proposal for the Singapore expansion is weak. It lacks foresight." "Father, the risk analysis," Leo began, his face flushing. "The risk analysis was written by a committee of cowards," Sterling interrupted, waving a hand. "I built Nexus by taking risks you can't even comprehend." Catherine placed a delicate hand on her husband's arm. "Sterling, dear, we're celebrating. Let's not talk business." "This is a celebration," Sterling retorted, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly as he looked at her. "A celebration of my continued success, which requires my continued vigilance." Jean-Pierre completed the ritual, decanting the deep red wine and pouring a small amount for Sterling to taste. Sterling swirled the liquid, his expression one of intense concentration, as if divining the future from its legs. He nodded again. Jean-Pierre proceeded to pour for the table. Isabella watched her hands, trembling slightly, as she held a tray of fresh bread. She was close enough to see the intricate pattern on Sterling's tie, close enough to hear Catherine's soft, resigned sigh. As Jean-Pierre poured the last glass, Sterling's, he moved with the grace of a dancer. But in that fluid motion, Isabella saw something else. A flicker, a moment of distraction as another waiter passed too close. Jean-Pierre's arm jostled, and his other hand, the one holding a folded napkin, passed directly over Sterling's glass. It was nothing, a blink and you'd miss it movement. But Isabella's senses, honed by years of hypervigilance around this man, screamed. Jean-Pierre retreated. The family resumed their strained conversation. Sterling picked up his fork, then set it down, deciding to begin with the wine. He lifted the glass, the ruby liquid catching the light of the chandelier. A toast was coming, a self-congratulatory monologue about his own brilliance. Isabella's eyes were locked on the glass. On the surface of the wine she saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible, oily film. A subtle distortion of the light that shouldn't be there. And then a scent. So faint, it was almost imaginary, masked by the rich bouquet of the wine and the food. But she knew it. The smell of bitter almonds and something cloyingly floral. It was the smell that had clung to the botany books her father used to study in his rare moments of leisure. Nerium oleander, a beautiful common garden plant, and one of an outcast, a source of one of the deadliest cardiac glycosides known to man. Sterling Rhodes raised his glass higher. "To Nexus," he began, his voice booming with pride, "and to the vision that continues to drive it." He brought the rim of the glass to his lips. Isabella's past, present, and a future she never imagined collided in a single, terrifying second. The hatred for the man who destroyed her father warred with the primal human instinct to prevent a death. She could stand here, do nothing, and get the justice she'd always dreamed of. Her father would be avenged. But watching a man die, even this man, wasn't justice. It was just more poison. Her body moved before her mind could object. 3 quick steps closed the distance. The professional mask shattered, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. "Stop!" The word was a choked whisper, but in the ensuing silence it sounded like a gunshot. Sterling paused the glass an inch from his mouth, his cold blue eyes fixed on her, filled with annoyance and disbelief at the interruption. "That's poison!" Isabella gasped, her voice trembling but clear. "The wine. It's poison." The The world froze, and then Sterling Rhodes dropped his glass. The sound of shattering crystal was an explosion in the cathedral-like silence of L'Etoile Filante. It wasn't the polite tinkle of a dropped flute. It was a violent, percussive crash as the Rydell Sommelier glass, a vessel worth hundreds of dollars, met the marble floor. Dark, precious wine, the 1982 Petrus, splashed across the pristine white tablecloth and Sterling Rhodes's immaculate trousers like arterial blood. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The tableau was frozen. Sterling, his hand still hovering in the air where the glass had been, his face a mask of utter shock. Catherine, her hand flying to her mouth, a perfect portrait of horrified surprise. Leo, his chair scraping back as he half rose, his expression a chaotic mix of confusion and alarm. Then chaos erupted. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling's voice, when it came, was not a shout, but a low, dangerous rumble that promised retribution. His eyes, fixed on Isabella, were chips of ice. The shock was already hardening into incandescent rage. Diners at nearby tables twisted in their seats, their hushed conversations dying. Waitstaff appeared from the wings like startled ghosts. The manager, a sleek, perpetually panicked man named Antoine, scurried towards them, his face pale. "Mr. Rhodes, is everything all right, mademoiselle? What have you done?" Antoine cried, his accent thickening with stress. Isabella stood her ground, her body vibrating with adrenaline. Her gaze didn't waver from Sterling's. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You can't drink that, any of it. There's something in it." "Poison," Leo scoffed, finally finding his voice. He looked from Isabella to his father with contemptuous disbelief. "That's absurd. She's hysterical. She probably just stumbled and is trying to cover her mistake." "I didn't stumble," Isabella insisted, her eyes pleading with Sterling. He was the only one who mattered. I smelled it." Catherine, recovering her composure with the speed of long practice, turned to her husband. "Sterling, darling, the girl is clearly unwell. It was an accident. Let's not make a scene." Her voice was a soothing balm, designed to smooth over any unsightly wrinkle in their perfect evening. But Isabella, watching her, saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not relief, not concern, but a cold, calculating assessment of the situation. It was there and gone in a flash. Sterling ignored them all. His powerful intellect was already churning, processing the impossible. The girl's interruption was insane, a career suicide move for a waitress. Why would she do it? Why that specific theatrical accusation? It was either the act of a madwoman or it was the truth. His life was a testament to the fact that enemies were everywhere. "Frank," Sterling said, his voice quiet, but carrying an authority that silenced the room. From an unobtrusive table near the entrance, a man who looked more like a retired linebacker than a diner rose to his feet. Frank Miller was the head of Sterling's personal security detail. He was large, impassive, and had been with Sterling for 20 years. He moved towards the table with an unnerving, silent purpose. "Sir," Frank said, his eyes scanning the scene, missing nothing. "Secure the table," Sterling commanded. "No one touches anything. Get her." He gestured towards Isabella with a sharp, dismissive flick of his wrist. Two other men, previously invisible in the restaurant's ecosystem, detached themselves from the walls and moved towards Isabella. She didn't resist as they flanked her, their presence both a threat and a strange sort of validation. They were taking her seriously. "This is ridiculous," Leo protested. "You're going to listen to a waitress over your own family. We were all about to drink it, and you should thank her that you didn't." Sterling snapped, his patience gone. He finally looked at the spilled wine staining the tablecloth, the shattered glass. He bent down cautiously and sniffed the air near the puddle. His expression tightened. He couldn't place the faint alien scent, but it was there, an uninvited guest at the feast. "The bottle, Jean-Pierre," Sterling said, turning to the sommelier who was standing frozen by the service station, his face ashen. "Bring me the bottle and the decanter. Now." Jean-Pierre, looking as if he were about to faint, scurried to obey. Frank directed one of his men to follow him, ensuring the chain of custody wasn't broken. The manager, Antoine, wrung his hands. "Mr. Rhodes, I assure you our cellar is impeccable, our staff." "Your staff is now a secondary concern, Antoine." Sterling cut him off coldly. "My primary concern is, who in this room wants me dead?" His gaze swept across the table, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on his wife and son, before moving on to the gawking patrons. The implicit threat was clear. Everyone was a suspect. As Frank's men began to lead Isabella away from the table towards a back office, she locked eyes with Catherine Rhodes one last time. The billionaire's wife gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't a gesture of denial or warning. It looked terrifyingly like pity. The walk through the bustling kitchen was a blur. The clatter of pans, the hiss of the grill, the shouts of the chefs. It all seemed to be happening on another planet. Isabella was shoved not ungently into the manager's cramped office. The door clicked shut behind her, plunging the small room into a tense silence broken only by the hum of a wine fridge. One of Frank's men stood by the door, arms crossed. Frank himself pulled up a chair and sat opposite her, his face unreadable. He didn't speak. He just watched her, letting the silence do the work. Isabella's adrenaline began to recede, leaving a cold dread in its place. What had she done? She had thrown away her job, her anonymity. She had placed herself at the center of a maelstrom in the life of the most powerful, dangerous man she had ever known. She thought of her father, of the quiet dignity with which he'd faced his ruin. He had fought his battles in courtrooms and boardrooms. She had just started a war in the middle of a 5-star restaurant with no weapons and no allies. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, the door opened, and Sterling Rhodes stepped inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. The small office seemed to shrink in his presence. He had removed his suit jacket, and the dark stain on his trousers was stark against the expensive fabric. He wasn't angry anymore. He was something far more terrifying. He was focused. He pulled over Antoine's desk chair and sat, his knees almost touching hers. He leaned forward, his cold blue eyes boring into her. "You have 60 seconds, Sterling Rhodes said, his voice dangerously soft. "You're going to tell me who you are, and then you're going to tell me precisely how you knew my wine was poisoned." The air in the manager's office was stale, thick with the scent of old cigars and Isabella's fear. Sterling Rhodes's ultimatum hung between them, a ticking clock counting down the seconds of her life as she knew it. His proximity was overwhelming. He radiated an aura of pure, compressed power that seemed to suck the very oxygen from the room. Isabella swallowed her throat dry. "My name is Isabella Rossi." Sterling's expression didn't change, but she saw a flicker of recognition in the depths of his cold eyes. He knew the name. Of course he knew. He was a man who never forgot a name, especially one attached to a company he had conquered. Rossi. He repeated the name, a flat, unemotional sound. "Logos Data Analytics. Your father was Marco Rossi." It wasn't a question. Isabella's heart clenched. He said the name of her father's life's work with the same casual indifference he might use to recall a stock ticker from a decade ago. To him, it was a footnote in his ascent. To her, it was everything. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength from the sudden surge of old anger. "He was, and you believe I wronged him." Sterling stated, his gaze unwavering. "You destroyed him." She corrected the words sharp. "You destroyed our family. I came to work here to see what kind of man could do that, and then sit down to $1,000 dinner without a single thought. A lesser man might have flinched or become defensive." Sterling Rhodes merely absorbed the information, filing it away. "So you have a motive for wanting me dead, or at the very least for creating a humiliating and expensive public spectacle." "If I wanted you dead," Isabella shot back, leaning forward, her fear momentarily eclipsed by indignation, "I would have let you drink the damn wine." The outburst seemed to please him. It was genuine. Frank, standing impassively by the door, shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. "You still haven't answered the important question, Ms. Rossi." Sterling said, his tone unchanged. "How did you know?" This was it. The moment her story would either be dismissed as a fantasy or accepted as a terrifying truth. She took a deep breath. "My father. Before the company, he was a botanist. It was his passion. He taught me. Our house was filled with books, samples extracts. He studied toxicology as a hobby, plant-based alkaloids, cardiac glycosides. He found it fascinating how something so beautiful could be so deadly." She could see her father now in his study, a gentle man with soil under his fingernails, excitedly explaining the chemical structure of digitalis from a foxglove plant. "One of the plants he studied extensively was Nerium oleander," she continued. "It's incredibly toxic. Ingesting even a small amount can cause severe cardiac arrest. The symptoms can mimic a heart attack, especially in a man of a certain age." The implication was clear. Sterling's jaw tightened, but he let her speak. "The poison is an extract. It's almost colorless, but in a liquid like red wine, it creates a very faint, oily film on the surface. You can only see it if the light hits it just right. But the smell, it's faint but distinctive. A little like bitter almonds, but sweeter. Floral. Once you know it, you never forget it." When the sommelier was pouring your glass, his hand passed over the top. "I thought I saw something, a small vial, a dropper. I don't know, it was too fast. But when you lifted the glass, the light from the chandelier caught the surface, and I saw the sheen. Then I smelled it." She looked at him, her eyes wide with the sincerity of her memory. "I smelled it, and I was back in my father's study, and I knew." Silence descended again. Sterling leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was dissecting her story, searching for flaws, for tells. He was a human lie detector, honed by decades of high-stakes poker and ruthless boardroom battles. "Frank," Sterling said, without taking his eyes off Isabella. "Sir, my glass, the tablecloth, the decanter. Have them sent to the lab at Nexus Tower. I want a full gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis done tonight. Use Dr. Chen's team. Tell them to test specifically for oleandrin and other cardiac glycosides. I want the results in 90 minutes. "Already on its way, sir," Frank replied. "The police are on standby. I've asked them to hold off making a scene until we have confirmation." Of course, Sterling Rhodes didn't call 911. He had his own labs, his own security, his own protocols that superseded the civil order. Sterling turned his attention back to Isabella. "This story is elaborate. You hate me. You get a job at my favorite restaurant. You study my habits. And on this particular night, you just happen to spot a rare, plant-based poison in my wine, a poison you know from your childhood botany lessons. It's a bit much, Ms. Rossi." "It's the truth," she said simply. "Let's entertain another theory." Sterling mused, his voice dropping. "Let's say you're the one who poisoned the wine. You put it in there intending for me to drink it. But at the last second, you lose your nerve. You panic. So you create this scene casting yourself as the hero, the savior. It's a brilliant way to deflect suspicion." Isabella felt a chill crawl up her spine. The cold, brutal logic of it was terrifying. It was exactly how he would think, how he would have planned it. "No," she whispered. "Why would I do that? To see me suffer?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "To have the satisfaction of the attempt to watch the chaos unfold and to walk away a hero instead of a convict. It's a much more elegant form of revenge than a simple murder." The door opened, and Frank stepped inside, holding a phone to his ear. He listened for a moment, his face impassive, then nodded. He ended the call and looked at Sterling. "The kitchen staff and servers are being questioned," Frank reported. "No one saw anything unusual, except for one thing. Jean-Pierre, the sommelier." "What about him?" Sterling asked. "He's gone." A jolt went through the room. "Gone?" Sterling demanded. "Left about 10 minutes after we brought the girl in here," Frank said. "Told one of the bussers he felt sick and was going to the restroom. Slipped out the service exit. His locker is empty. His apartment is already cleared out. He's in the wind." Isabella's heart leaped. This was proof. It wasn't her. It was Jean-Pierre. But Sterling's face hardened. "Or he was your accomplice, and this was the plan all along. You make the scene he disappears. It creates a perfect scapegoat." The hope that had flared within her died just as quickly. She was trapped in his web of paranoia, every fact twisted to fit his narrative of her guilt. She was starting to understand how her father must have felt, facing an opponent who could redefine reality itself. "I didn't do this," she said, her voice a raw plea. "I swear on my father's memory, I saved your life." Invoking her father was a gamble. It could either touch a sliver of humanity she prayed he possessed, or it could confirm his darkest suspicions about her quest for vengeance. Sterling Rhodes stared at her for a long, heavy moment. He looked at her tear-filled eyes, her defiant chin, the raw honesty of her fear. He had built an empire by reading people, by distinguishing desperation from deception. And in Isabella Rossi, he saw something that defied his cynical expectations. He saw the ghost of her father, a man he had respected even as he crushed him. The phone in his pocket buzzed. It was his private line. He glanced at the screen, then answered, putting it on speaker. A crisp, professional voice filled the small office. "Mr. Rhodes, it's Dr. Chen." "Report," Sterling commanded. "The initial analysis is complete, sir. It's conclusive. The wine samples from the glass, the tablecloth, and the decanter are all heavily contaminated with a concentrated solution of cardiac glycosides, specifically oleandrin. The dosage—" Dr. Chen paused. "The dosage in that single glass would have been fatal within the hour. There is no question, sir. This was a serious, well-executed attempt to kill you." A profound silence filled the room. The clinical scientific confirmation turned the evening's surreal drama into a cold, hard fact. Someone had tried to murder Sterling Rhodes, and the only reason he was still alive was sitting right in front of him. He ended the call and looked at Isabella. His expression was one she had never seen before. Not in photos, not in news clips, not even in her nightmares. The arrogance was gone. The cold fury was gone. In its place was a chilling, stark vulnerability. The monument had a crack in its foundation. "All right, Ms. Rossi," Sterling said, his voice low and raspy. "I believe you. Now you're going to help me find out which member of my family hired your sommelier to kill me." The bubble of l'étoile filante had burst, but Sterling Rhodes, with the practiced ease of a king securing his castle, ensured the fallout was contained. The NYPD was brought in, but it was a quiet surgical operation led by a veteran detective from the Major Case Squad, a man named Connolly, who understood the delicate ecosystem of New York's ultra-wealthy. There were no flashing lights, no uniformed officers swarming the dining room. The other patrons were discreetly informed of a gas leak and ushered out, their exorbitant bills quietly voided. The restaurant was now a crime scene, albeit the most elegant one Detective Connolly had ever seen. The real nerve center of the investigation, however, was not on site. It was 20 blocks south in the sterile, soundproofed penthouse suite of Nexus Tower. Isabella found herself in the strangest position of her life. An hour ago she was serving overpriced breadsticks. Now she was sitting on a plush leather sofa in Sterling Rhodes's private office, a room larger than her entire apartment. Frank had provided her with a bottle of water, and she clutched it like a shield. Across the vast expanse of polished mahogany, Sterling sat behind his desk, the city lights twinkling behind him like a conquered kingdom. Detective Connolly, a weary-looking man in a rumpled suit, stood by the window taking notes. The focus of the investigation had shifted immediately to the only people at the table, Catherine and Leo Rhodes. "Let's start with your wife," Connolly said, his voice a gravelly monotone. Sterling's face was grim. Catherine wouldn't have the nerve. The statement was meant to be a defense, but it sounded more like an insult. "With all due respect, Mr. Rhodes, in my experience, nerve has little to do with it. Opportunity and motive are the key ingredients," Connolly countered gently. "Your wife was at the table. That's opportunity. What's the motive?" Sterling was silent for a long moment, staring out at the city he owned. "Our marriage is complicated. It's more of a partnership now, an arrangement." He said it with a cold finality that spoke volumes. "But she benefits immensely from that arrangement. My death would complicate her life, not simplify it. Unless your prenuptial agreement is more generous upon your death than in a divorce," Connolly pointed out. "The prenup is ironclad," Sterling snapped. "She gets a handsome settlement in a divorce. She inherits the bulk of my personal assets upon my death, minus what goes to Leo and to the foundation. The difference is substantial, but hardly worth the risk of a murder conviction." Frank, who had been coordinating with his team via an earpiece, stepped forward. "Sir, we've reviewed Mrs. Rhodes's movements for the past week. Nothing out of the ordinary. Charity luncheons, gallery openings, fittings at her couturier. Her financials are clean, except for one thing." "What is it?" Sterling demanded. "A recurring monthly payment. $50,000 wired from a private account to an LLC in the Cayman Islands. It's been happening for the last 8 months. Sterling's eyes narrowed. "Blackmail, an affair." "We're tracing the LLC now," Frank said. "It's a ghost corporation designed to be anonymous. It will take time to peel back the layers." Isabella listened, a silent observer, to the dismantling of a family. This was the rot she had always suspected existed beneath the gleaming surface. "And what about Leo?" Connolly asked, turning the page in his notepad. A flicker of something dark and complex crossed Sterling's face. It was a pain deeper than the thought of his wife's betrayal. "Leo is weak," he said, the words laced with a lifetime of disappointment. "He's impatient. He thinks he's ready to run Nexus." "So he has a motive," Connolly said. "Control of the company." "He wouldn't inherit control outright," Sterling clarified. "My will stipulates a 5-year transitional period, with the board having oversight. But yes, he would be the new chairman. He would be out of my shadow." "We checked his financials as well," Frank interjected. "He has significant personal debts. He's been making risky side investments trying to prove he can make money without the family name. Most of them have failed. He owes money to some very unsavory private lenders." Isabella remembered the look on Leo's face at dinner, the flash of resentment when his father belittled his proposal. Was it enough to kill for to trade a life of immense privilege for a life of ultimate power, albeit one that started with patricide? The door to the office opened, and a junior security analyst entered, handing Frank a tablet. Frank studied it for a moment, his brow furrowed. "Sir," he said, his voice grim. "We have something from the restaurant's security cameras. We've been reviewing all footage from the past month, cross-referencing anyone who had contact with the sommelier, Jean-Pierre." He turned the tablet so Sterling and Connolly could see. The video was grainy, taken from a camera in the service corridor behind the kitchen. The timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks prior. It showed Jean-Pierre talking to someone in a hushed, intense conversation. The other person's back was mostly to the camera, but the figure was tall, wearing a tailored suit. They passed a thick manila envelope to Jean-Pierre, who quickly concealed it inside his jacket. "Can you identify the other person?" Sterling asked, his voice tight. "Not from this angle," Frank said. "But watch." He tapped the screen. The figure turned slightly to leave, and for a split second their profile was visible. It was blurry, indistinct, but the line of the jaw, the cut of the hair— "It's Leo," Sterling whispered. The words were heavy with a terrible finality. Detective Connolly leaned closer. "It's suggestive, but it's not definitive proof. It could be anyone." "Enhance the image," Sterling commanded the analyst. "Run facial recognition. I want every pixel analyzed." As the analyst scurried off, Sterling sank back into his chair, looking older than he had just hours before. The betrayal of a business rival was a cost of doing business. The betrayal of his wife was a wound to his pride. But the betrayal of his own son— that was a dagger to the heart. Isabella felt a strange, unwelcome pang of sympathy. She had spent a decade hating this man, picturing him as a heartless caricature. But seeing him now stripped of his power, facing the ugliest of truths— he was just a man. A father, staring into the abyss of his own son's treachery. The phone on Sterling's desk rang, the sound jarring in the tense room. It was the secure line from his home. Frank answered it, listened, and then held it out to Sterling. "It's Catherine." Sterling took the phone, his face a granite mask. "What is it?" Catherine's voice, tinny and strained through the speaker, filled the office. "Sterling, I'm at the house. The police have been here. They questioned me. It was humiliating." "It's a murder investigation, Catherine. Humiliation is the least of our concerns," he replied coldly. "Our concerns. Sterling, I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." She took a shaky breath. "It's about Leo." Every person in the room held their breath. "He's in trouble, Sterling," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Deep trouble. He's desperate. He came to me a month ago begging for money. He said he owed people. Dangerous people. I gave him what I could from my private account. I've been sending them money. Every month to keep them away from him. That's the LLC you've probably already found. Sterling's knuckles were white where he gripped the phone. You paid off my son's gambling debts without telling me. They weren't gambling debts, she cried, a note of hysteria creeping into her voice. It was something worse, an investment that went sour with the wrong partners. They were threatening him, Sterling. He was terrified. He said he needed to get control of his inheritance, that it was the only way to pay them back and be free. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. The debt, the desperation, the meeting with the sommelier. Where is he now, Catherine? Sterling asked, his voice dangerously calm. I don't know. After the police left, he came to my suite. He was frantic. He said the plan had failed and that he needed to leave the country. He packed a bag and he's gone. Sterling. Leo is gone. The line went silent. Sterling slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle. The image on the tablet, the secret payments, his wife's panicked confession, it all pointed to one devastating conclusion. His son, his own flesh and blood, had tried to murder him for his inheritance. Detective Connolly cleared his throat. We'll put out an alert at all airports and border crossings. We'll find him. Sterling didn't seem to hear him. He was staring at Isabella. His eyes filled with a strange, hollow light. He had spent his life building an empire to pass on, and the very heir he was building it for had tried to send him to his grave to get it faster. The one person in the world who had a real reason to want me dead, Sterling said softly, his voice raspy with a terrible irony, is the one who saved my life, and my own son. He couldn't finish the sentence. The monster had been revealed, but it wasn't the one Isabella had spent 10 years hunting. The real monster was born of greed and weakness, and it had been sitting at his own dinner table all along. The hours that followed Leo's exposure were a maelstrom of controlled chaos. An international manhunt was initiated for the fugitive heir. The official investigation proceeded with surgical discretion, but the real nerve center was the penthouse suite of Nexus Tower. It was there, high above the city, that the true gravity of the betrayal settled. When the detectives and analysts had finally departed, a profound silence filled Sterling Rhodes's office. Only he, his security chief, Frank and Isabella remained. Sterling rose from his desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his posture rigid. He looked down upon the river of lights below a kingdom he had conquered, yet a home he had failed to secure. My entire life, he began, his voice a low, gravelly monotone, has been about threat assessment. I anticipate hostile takeovers, market collapses, political instabilities. I build firewalls and fortresses. Yet I never imagined the most lethal threat would come from my own blood, sleeping under my own roof. He turned to face Isabella, his eyes holding a look she had never seen before. Not arrogance or anger, but a raw, chilling vulnerability. You, Ms. Rossi, he said, his voice laced with a terrible irony. The one person in the world with a legitimate reason to wish me harm. And you are the one who saved my life. You looked at my family and saw a snake in the garden that I was blind to. Why? Isabella met his gaze, her fear replaced by a cold clarity. Because I wasn't distracted by love or history. I was only looking at you. For 10 years you have been the singular focus of my anger. When you are studying your enemy, you notice things others miss. Her brutal honesty seemed to resonate with him. In his world of sycophants, her unvarnished truth was a currency more valuable than gold. "My father always said to keep your enemies closer than your friends," Sterling mused. "It seems I failed to identify who was who." He took a step towards her. "I find myself in your debt, a position I am unaccustomed to. More than that, I find myself in need of your help." The words stunned Isabella. Sterling Rhodes did not ask for help. He issued commands. "Help with what?" she asked. "The police are hunting for your son." "The police will find a frightened boy who ran from his debts," Sterling said with disgust. "They see a simple, sordid motive. I see something more. Leo is weak and foolish, but he is not a mastermind. The sophistication of this plot, the choice of poison, the timing, the recruitment of the sommelier, it's beyond his capabilities. He was a pawn, Ms. Rossi, and I need to find the player who moved him." He stopped directly in front of her. "My judgment is compromised. My world is filled with blind spots. You are an outsider. Your only bias is against me, which paradoxically makes you the most trustworthy person I know. I want to hire you effective immediately. I will provide you with everything you need: access, resources, security. Your job will be to act as my eyes and ears, to look for the cracks in a facade I am too close to see." It was a dizzying, dangerous proposal, to step inside the very world she had spent a decade despising from the outside, and in return, she asked, her heart pounding. Sterling's expression was deadly serious. "When this is over, we will revisit the matter of your father. We will open the books on the acquisition of Logos Data Analytics. I am a man of my word. Justice in all its forms will be served. If wrongs were committed in my name, I will right them. This isn't hush money, Ms. Rossi. This is an offer of atonement." There it was. Not a payoff, but a promise. The chance not for revenge, but for restoration. The justice she had craved for a decade was suddenly within her grasp, offered by the very man she held responsible. She thought of her father, a man who built things, not destroyed them. He would not want his memory to be a catalyst for more hatred, but for the pursuit of truth. She looked at the powerful, broken man before her and made her choice. The path of bitterness had led her here to this impossible crossroads. The new path was terrifying, but it was the only one that led forward. "All right," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'll do it." A pact was sealed in the silence of that penthouse office. An unlikely, volatile alliance was forged between a billionaire and the daughter of the man he'd ruined. Isabella Rossi was no longer just a waitress or a victim. She was now a player in the most dangerous game of her life. Isabella's new life was a dizzying immersion into a world she had only ever viewed from the outside. Her official title, Special Consultant to the CEO, gave her unrestricted access to the inner workings of Sterling Rhodes's empire. While the role felt like an elaborate costume, her purpose remained sharp and clear. She ignored the whispers from the executive staff, her focus absolute. Sterling was convinced his son had been a pawn, and Isabella believed the key to finding the puppet master was buried in the details the initial frantic investigation had missed. Working alongside Frank in the secure command center within Nexus Tower, she began to sift through the evidence again, not as a collection of facts, but as a story with missing pages. She started with Catherine Rhodes. The official story is that Catherine was paying off Leo's debts via a secret offshore account, Isabella stated, pointing to a transaction history on a large monitor. But the story has a flaw. Look at the dates. Frank zoomed in. The first wire transfer to the Cayman LLC was 8 months ago, Isabella explained. Our intelligence shows Leo's disastrous investment didn't collapse until 4 months ago. He wasn't desperate for money before then. So if Catherine wasn't paying his lenders for those first 4 months, who was she paying? It was the first significant crack in the family's narrative. A lie, or at least a carefully constructed half-truth, sat at the heart of the motive. While Frank tasked his offshore team with tearing down the corporate veil of the mysterious LLC, Isabella pursued another angle. The poison, she said, thinking aloud. Oleandrin extract. It's too specific, too elegant. Jean-Pierre was a sommelier. He knew wine, not botany. Someone with specialized knowledge had to procure it for him. Someone who knew it could mimic a heart attack. She requested full access to Catherine Rhodes's communication records for the past year. For 2 days, Isabella immersed herself in the life of the billionaire's wife, a digital tapestry of charity events, designer appointments, and vapid social engagements. It was a portrait of luxurious emptiness. Then deep within a folder of deleted emails, she found it. It was a chain of messages with an exclusive high-end travel agency. The emails meticulously detailed plans for a secret trip, a 1-week romantic getaway to a private secluded villa on the shores of Lake Como. The booking was for the week immediately following the attempted murder. Catherine was using an alias, but the name of her travel companion was listed clearly on the itinerary. It was not Sterling Rhodes. "Frank," Isabella called out, her voice tight with tension. "I need you to identify this man." She pointed to the name on the screen. Richard Davies. Frank's professional composure vanished, replaced by stark disbelief. "That's not possible," he breathed. "Who is he?" Isabella pressed. "Richard Davies." Frank said, the name tasting like poison itself, is the chief operating officer of Exus Dynamics. He's been Sterling's right-hand man for 15 years, his most trusted friend. The revelation detonated in the room, recasting the entire conspiracy in a new horrific light. Richard Davies was the one person besides family whom Sterling considered unimpeachable. He was the loyal strategist, the heir apparent to the corporate throne. The man everyone assumed would steady the ship. Frank's team moved with renewed, furious energy. The cracks Isabella had found now shattered into a gaping chasm. Within an hour, the dominoes fell in rapid succession. A background check revealed Richard Davies held a biochemistry degree, a detail omitted from his corporate bio. The offshore team confirmed the Cayman LLC was owned by a holding company, controlled by Davies. Catherine had been secretly paying her lover. Finally, the travel agency, under immense pressure, provided records showing a kickback from the sommelier. Jean-Pierre had been funneled into an account used by Davies to arrange their secret trips. The web was complete. Isabella saw the whole hideous picture with perfect clarity. "This was never about Leo's debt," she said to Frank, her voice a low, grim whisper. "This was a palace coup. Richard and Catherine were the architects. They manipulated Leo using his desperation as the perfect cover. With Sterling dead and Leo a fugitive, wanted for his murder, the board would turn to the one man who could provide stability, the loyal COO Richard. Catherine, as the grieving widow and majority shareholder, would ensure his appointment. They'd have everything: the company, the fortune, and each other. The final chilling piece was Leo himself. He was likely told the vial contained a sedative, something to merely incapacitate his father. His shock and panic at the restaurant were real. He was the perfect, tragic scapegoat. Frank stared at the evidence, his face a mask of cold fury. His life's work was to protect Sterling from his enemies, and the most dangerous one of all had been at his side all along. "We have to tell him," Frank said, his voice heavy with the weight of the coming conversation. They now had to present Sterling with a betrayal far deeper and more painful than that of his own son. The treachery of his trusted brother-in-arms and his wife of 30 years. The final confrontation was set not in a cold boardroom, but in the heart of Sterling's private world, the grand, silent library of his Fifth Avenue penthouse. Catherine and Richard Davies were summoned under the guise of an urgent corporate matter. They arrived as a seamless unit, their faces etched with practiced concern, offering condolences for the trouble with Leo. Richard even placed a comforting hand on Sterling's shoulder. Sterling stood by the unlit fireplace, a monolith of cold calm. Frank guarded the door, and Isabella sat in a wing-back chair, the quiet catalyst for this final reckoning. "We have found Leo," Sterling said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He gestured to Frank, who pressed a button on a small digital recorder placed on the mahogany table. Leo's voice, thin, frantic, and stripped of all bravado, filled the opulent room. It was a recording of an intercepted call. "He told me. It was a sedative Richard gave me, the vial, the money for the waiter. He said it would just make father sick, that it was the only way to prove myself. Poison. Oh God, I never knew. I would never." The recording clicked off, leaving a devastating silence in its wake. Richard Davies's mask of sympathy dissolved, replaced by a sneer of pure contempt. Catherine's face a moment ago, a portrait of grief, was now pale with exposed guilt. "So the little coward broke," Richard hissed. "It doesn't matter. You were destroying the company, Sterling, a relic too arrogant to see the future. I did what was necessary. You did what I thought was necessary." Catherine interjected, her voice trembling with a lifetime of suppressed fury. She stepped forward, claiming the betrayal as her own. "This was my idea. Richard was too cautious. I couldn't spend another decade as your beautiful silent trophy. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a possession to display at parties while you crushed every thought I ever had. You built this magnificent golden cage and were furious when I finally learned how to fly out of it. Leo's desperation wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. It was a confession born not of remorse, but of a desperate, venomous need to finally be seen as a player in her own life, not just an accessory in his. The raw hatred that had festered for 30 years was finally laid bare. Sterling listened, his face impassive, but his eyes reflected the profound emptiness of a world shattered. The enemy wasn't at the gates. The enemy had been sharing his bed and running his company. The aftermath was swift and surgically quiet. There were no flashing cameras or public scandals. Richard Davies and Catherine Rhodes were discreetly taken into custody. The story, meticulously crafted by Sterling's PR team, was of a rogue executive who manipulated a fragile wife and a desperate son. In exchange for his full testimony, Leo was not imprisoned, but sent to a private medical facility in Switzerland. The Rhodes Empire, though deeply wounded, would remain standing. A week later, Isabella met Sterling in the same library. The oppressive tension was gone, replaced by a somber quiet. A thick binder sat on the table between them. "This," Sterling began, his voice weary but clear, "is the complete unredacted history of the Logos data analytics acquisition. My legal team found irregularities, tactics that were overly aggressive even for me. I was blinded by the prize and didn't scrutinize the methods." He pushed the binder towards her. It was not just an archive. It was a confession. "My obsession with winning cost your father everything. A simple check cannot undo that. Vengeance cannot undo that. But perhaps construction can. He outlined his proposal. He was liquidating the assets of the shell corporations used in the hostile takeover. With that capital, he was establishing a new independent entity, the Marco Rossi Foundation, dedicated to funding and mentoring ethical technology startups. The endowment was 10 times what Logos had ever been worth. It will be a legacy of innovation, not destruction, Sterling said, looking at her directly. And a legacy needs someone to guide it. The foundation will require an executive director, someone with integrity, with a sharp eye for the truth, and with a personal understanding of what is at stake. I'm offering the position to you. Isabella was speechless. This was a justice she had never conceived of. It wasn't the satisfaction of seeing Sterling fall, but the profound triumph of seeing her father's vision reborn, magnified, and made permanent. Her long, dark quest for revenge had led her not to an execution, but to a resurrection. She looked at the man across from her, no longer a monster, but a deeply flawed human who had stared into the abyss of his own life and chosen to build something new from the wreckage. In that moment, the last embers of hatred within her finally cooled. "I accept," she said. And for the first time since she was a girl, the future felt not like a debt to be paid, but like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. And so a story that began with a single gasped warning in a luxury restaurant ends not with a simple act of vengeance, but with a complex and profound redemption. It's a stark reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from those we hold closest, from behind the gilded walls we build to protect ourselves. Sterling Rhodes, a titan who could command the world, was brought to his knees by the lies in his own home. And Isabella Rossi, a young woman fueled by a righteous hatred, found that true justice wasn't about destroying a life, but about rebuilding a legacy. Their story proves that sometimes the person who saves you is the last one you'd ever expect, and that a single moment of courage can unravel a lifetime of deceit. If this story of betrayal, suspense, and unexpected redemption captivated you, please hit the like button to let us know. For more true life dramas, where fortunes turn on a dime and secrets are brought into the light, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. And please share this video with someone who loves a story that proves the most astonishing truths are often stranger than fiction. Finally, leave a comment below. What would you have done in Isabella's place? Would you have let him drink?